Welcome to In Focus with Ejaz Haider. Our top story tonight is about Dr. Abdullah Abdullah's 3-day visit to Pakistan. He will be leaving tomorrow. After decades of violence, invasion, bloodshed, and suffering, Afghanistan is finally generating some hope. In a series of tweets, Dr. Abdullah, chairman of Afghanistan High Council for Peace, informed the world of his visit, his meetings, his keynote at the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad, his discussions, and thanked Pakistan for its role in the Afghan peace process. This is what he said, and I quote, "Pakistan played a critical role in facilitating the talks and has even a more important role to play here on not only supporting the process through a successful end, but also in standing with the people and government of Afghanistan in building a peaceful and prosperous neighborhood." This is what he said while speaking at ISSI. He also added, after many troubling years, we now need to go beyond the usual stale rhetoric and shadowy conspiracy theories that have held us back. Meanwhile, Pakistan introduced Tuesday a new visa policy for Afghanistan to facilitate business and people-to-people contacts between the two countries. Officials said the travel document approved by the federal cabinet will make it easy for Afghan citizens to acquire multiple entry visit visas, including those for long-term business as well as investment and student visas. Until now, Islamabad was issuing only one-time entry visas to Afghan visitors. Pakistan's Special Envoy for Afghanistan, Ambassador Mohammad Sadiq, noted in a tweet that a new category of health visa also has been enacted to enable Afghan patients to receive visas on arrival at the overland border. Sadiq said all border terminals with Afghanistan located in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province have been open to pedestrian traffic 4 days a week, beginning Tuesday, which was yesterday. To discuss this further, we are joined by Dr. Riffat, Head of Department of Public Policy at the National University of Science and Technology, David Sedney, who is a Senior Fellow at the Center for International and Strategic Studies in Washington, D.C., and we'll later also be joined by Najib Sharifi, a former journalist from Kabul. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me begin with David Sedney here. David, how do you look at the visit of Dr. Abdullah to Islamabad and also its significance and timing?
Over the last 20 years, over the last 50 years, there have been many successful visits by Afghan leaders to Pakistan and by Pakistani leaders to Afghanistan, but the follow-up has not been there. So this was a good visit. President Ghani had good visits back in 2014-15. President Hamid Karzai had good visits. King Nader Shah had a good visit to Pakistan. Had good visits to Pakistan over 50 years ago. So, in international relations, visits can be solely symbolic, or they can be real, and the reality is what happens on the ground afterwards. So that's my perspective is very much one of history. I will say that in Kabul, talking to people here, there's a great deal of skepticism, but also a great deal of hope. People want this visit to mean what it says, but they are waiting to see what actually happens on the ground, and most particularly what happens in Doha.
Right. I understand and I appreciate your cautious comment with reference to, and of course, the historical trajectory. I perfectly understand that, but given the situation, given the context, because when you talk about previous visits, and I'm only talking about the last 15, 20 years, the context, the situation on the ground was fairly different as I see it from what it now is. Although, as Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said at the Institute of Strategic Studies before Dr. Abdullah's remarks that there is hope, but there is a lot of works that still needs to be done. So my question really was directed towards, notwithstanding the skepticism, towards the context in which the visit took place.
I think the context in which the visit took place is, to be frank, actually quite similar to the past visits. Yes, there are these talks going on in Doha, but so far they're not going anywhere. The situation on the ground in Afghanistan, there continues to be very high levels of violence against the civilian population by the Taliban. So for people in Afghanistan, people in Kabul don't feel any safer today than they did before the visit. So again, it depends on what happens in reality. The rhetoric is good, but it's been good before. And there's some change in the context, but not in the reality of the day-to-day lives of Afghans. And until there's a change in the reality, until there's a real ceasefire, then people will see that this kind of rhetoric has some kind of something real behind the rhetoric.
Right. Let me pull in Dr. Hussain here. Dr. Hussain, you heard David Sedney. There's still, as he says, a lot of skepticism. I want to get your reading of this visit, its timing, its significance, and whether you want to be as, shall I say, pessimistic as David Sedney seems to be.
Well, Ejaz, for one thing, I'm very hopeful about the outcome of this visit, because not only it was a 3-day visit, the visit happened after a gap of almost 12 years, because the last time when he was here as a foreign minister was in 2008, if I recall correctly, and there was a long hiatus between and now. But now there was a lot of effort that was put in by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to make this visit happen. You will recall that before coming to Islamabad, Dr. Abdullah had mentioned that both countries had grievances against each other, but none of those grievances were articulated in terms of his public appearances. He spoke at the Institute of Studies, and I was present. And what gave me tremendous hope was the body language of Abdullah. He wasn't. He didn't sound at all, or didn't look like a leader who was under siege or whose future was very much in doubt. So Pakistan has finally reached out to the Tajik leadership, particularly the leadership of the Northern Alliance, of which Abdullah is a key stakeholder. But of course, and I should also say this, that apart from the visa facility that Pakistan has extended it to him while he was here, he also had a very good discussion with the Parliament of Pakistan and the Chairman Senate, and he has met all these stakeholders or everybody who is who in Pakistan. And Shah Mahmood Qureshi Saab, our Foreign Minister, accompanied him to the Institute of Studies, in which he made absolutely clear that Pakistan is interested in having a peaceful, stable, and a friendly Afghanistan. But he also added a caveat, which was a title from Ayub Khan's biography, in which he had mentioned that we want friends in Kabul, but we would not like to be their masters. So hopefully Pakistan has learned the lessons of having meddled too much in Afghanistan's internal affairs. And to me, all the optics suggest, and particularly the public messaging that came out from Islamabad suggests to me that all is well and good. But the reality on ground will determine what happens actually in Afghanistan, or whether Abdullah, in which Pakistan has now chosen to invest heavily, would be there in the next 4 or 5 years. That is something which will depend on the outcome of Doha talks.
Right. David, you have had a long career with the government. You understand how these things work. Our sources say that, notwithstanding the public rhetoric, the meetings, the internal discussions were frank. They weren't, sweetening anything. There were real concerns on both sides. They were expressed. And I think that was one of the reasons that sort of gives me a sense that the real issues were talked about, they were not shirked. And so from these meetings, both sides have, understood each other's position better. And that seems to be a positive development.
Ejaz, I'm always hopeful myself, and I will echo the hopes, but I will also repeat the wisdom of a senior diplomat that I have great respect, that hope is not a policy. Unfortunately, Dr. Abdullah did not meet with all the important people in the Pakistani leadership. When Ambassador Khalilzad goes to Islamabad, he meets sometimes only with the leaders of the Pakistani military. I did not see any interaction with the Pakistani military. And until that happens, as well as the kind of civilian leadership meetings that happened, then there's a good reason to be skeptical that what happened in those meetings, no matter how frank, will have any impact on Pakistan's actions.
The government is very clear, as is the military leadership. And if you recall, the military leadership went to Kabul very recently, met with President Ashraf Ghani. So to imply that somehow they are not on the same page, I think would be a little bit unfair, because on more than one occasion it has been said very clearly that Pakistani government in its entirety looks at developments in Afghanistan and consider peace and stability in Afghanistan as absolutely crucial for Pakistan's own security.
Well, thank you, Ejaz. You and I have discussed this and related issues a number of times, and I agree this is probably not the time to go into that. And I'll go back to my original analysis that what really matters about this visit is what happens as a result, the actions that happen. The words are good, the hope is there, but the reality is what happens on the ground, both in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but also in Doha.
Right. Thank you so much, David S. Sedney, speaking with us. Let me go back to Dr. Hussain here. Dr. Hussain, what do you think of what David Sedney is saying? Let me add here that I've had David Sedney on my program a number of times. And it will be fair to say that he has been and remains one of the critics of this peace process, at least its modalities, in terms of why the Kabul government was not part of this. So it seems to me that one has to also keep in mind his criticism of the process and its modalities itself in terms of understanding what he is saying here.
Well, Ejaz, as I said, the ground situation, which means that not only the position of the warring factions, because there has been a promise that there will be reduction in violence, but we know that in the last couple of months, ever since the Doha peace talks started, there have been large number of casualties suffered by the civilians, by the military personnel. So that undercuts this whole notion of the commitment by either side to reduce in violence. However, having said that, my indications are, or at least my reading of the reports that are coming out of Doha, suggests that Doha talks have not been derailed, even though there's some sort of an understanding that is still being evolved, whether these Doha peace talks will lead to a ceasefire or not. But unless the ceasefire is actually agreed upon and is implemented, all bets are off. But having said that, to me it appears that Mr. Abdullah's visit to Pakistan was very timely, in the sense that it occurred while these talks were going on. And I'm sure, while we are not privy to what went on privately between, or what kind of conversations that took place between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Abdullah's very large delegation, who, by the way, had a very, I think there were 30 or 35 odd members who accompanied him. I have never seen such a large delegation of a person who has come and visited Pakistan. There have been many visits by Ashraf Ghani to Islamabad, but those were, short visits. But he stayed here for 3 full days, and he very wistfully recalled his days as refugees in Pakistan. So I think the distrust level which had existed between Abdullah and Islamabad as the leadership has considerably come down, and I would like to see this visit in that particular light. So I do not share the pessimism showed by David that this visit has not accomplished anything, but it is just rhetorical. But apart from the public messaging, the stakeholders, the wide range of stakeholders, the parliamentarians and the people in the military, and his call on the Prime Minister, which essentially means that at least on the issue of the need for peaceful Afghanistan, to me it indicates that the civilian leadership as well as the military leadership is on the same page.
Right. So we got the US, we are getting the Pakistani view. Let's now get an Afghan view, and we are joined by Najib Sharifi, the former journalist and now a member of Afghanistan Analysis and Awareness, which is a Kabul-based think tank. Mr. Sharifi, thank you so much for your time. Give me your reading of the timing, the significance of Dr. Abdullah's 3-day visit to Pakistan, and what do you think in terms of the substance of the visit?
I believe it's a very significant visit, and it happens at a time where there is a lot of momentum taking place with regards to peace settlement in Afghanistan. However, we have to keep in mind that there is still significant flaws in terms of confidence and lack of, in other words, there is significant lack of confidence between the two parties or between the two countries. But in Afghanistan, people are very hopeful that with the emergence of this opportunity, the 4-decade war will end, or a window of opportunity has appeared, which Afghan people celebrate. However, we have to remain extremely cautious because there's a lot of factors that could destroy the peace process.
Mr. Sharifi, one of the things that Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and Dr. Abdullah talked about when Dr. Abdullah spoke at the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad, and that had to do with reduction in violence and a ceasefire. We've been talking on this program about this particular aspect multiple times because, and my own view has been, and the guests have mostly agreed with that there are other elements, violent elements in Afghanistan. For instance, based TTP, some of those groups are affiliated with ISIS. Then there are certain other freelancers from Central Asia. So it is all the more important for the Kabul government and the Taliban to agree to a ceasefire so that the energies can be directed towards cleaning up these other violent elements. Is that something that you would agree with? Is that also a sense in Kabul?
Well, yes. We have to keep in mind that one of the byproducts of the past 4 decades of conflict in Afghanistan and to some extent in the region has been extensive growth of radical ideologies, of extremist ideologies. So today, when we are talking about peace in Afghanistan, Taliban are probably one main factor, but there are so many other groups who could perpetuate violence in the country, and the prevalence of the extremist ideology has created the impetus for perpetuation of the conflict. So even if we remain hopeful and we see success of the current peace process, this will not necessarily translate to a cessation of conflict in Afghanistan, because for durable peace, in the country and beyond in the region, we have to find effective ways to clean up the extremist ideology that has been growing in Afghanistan and beyond the borders of Afghanistan in the past 4 decades.
I agree with you. Let me go, Dr. Hussain, on this. Dr. Hussain, one of the things that the foreign minister talked about, and I'm assuming that obviously this will also be discussed in other meetings, is the presence of the TTP terrorist affiliates on Afghanistan soil, from where there have been attacks on Pakistan. So it seems to me that one of the very important reasons for Pakistan's desire to facilitate the peace process is also for Pakistan's own security, because it will become easier for Pakistan and Afghanistan to cooperate and flush out these terrorists wherever they might be. Is that something that you also picked up when you were there at the ISSI?
Most certainly, I did, Ejaz, because there were 3 or 4 questions which were directly related to this aspect of, TTP's cross-border attacks against Pakistan. And there were several people who had raised this concern with him, to which Dr. Abdullah responded very categorically. He said that, I assure you that Afghanistan's territory will not be used against any other state, including Pakistan. So, which was essentially a message that he was sending out to Islamabad, message of reassurance. And he said that we need to cooperate together to fight against these forces, which was something which I had not seen, at least in public discourse or public messaging that has come out from Kabul. So I would say that there is a newfound desire on the part of the government in Kabul, particularly on the part of Abdullah as the chief executive, that he would like to do everything which will bring the situation under control. Of course, the traditional argument from Afghanistan's side has been that Afghanistan's government does not control these areas and their writ does not extend there. So therefore, these are no man's land and no-go areas. But Dr. Abdullah was very categoric. He did not acknowledge this as a fact, but he went on to assure the Islamabad audience that he was willing to fully cooperate with Pakistan as far as the management of Afghanistan-Pakistan border, particularly the issue of cross-border attacks by these terrorist groups against Pakistan was concerned.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Riffat Hussain. Thank you also, Najib, Sharifi, for speaking with us. We shall take a short break and return to discuss a statement by Amnesty International that it has been forced to halt its operations in India because of the Indian government's policy of reprisals. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. Our second story tonight is about a statement by Amnesty International that it has been forced to halt its operations in India because of fear of reprisals by the Indian government. India is being ruled by a right-wing government linked with an organization that believes in Hindu supremacy. Amnesty said its bank accounts had been frozen and it had been forced to lay off staff in the country and suspend all its campaign and research work. India's government said in a statement that the accusations were unfortunate, exaggerated, and far from the truth. Rajat Khosla, Amnesty's Senior Director of Research, Advocacy and Policy, told the BBC, and I quote what he said, "We are facing a rather unprecedented situation in India. Amnesty International India has been facing an onslaught of attacks, bullying, and harassment by the government in a very systematic manner. This is all down to the human rights work that we were doing and the government not wanting to answer questions we raised, whether it's in terms of our investigations into the Delhi riots or the silencing of voices in Jammu and Kashmir," unquote. To discuss this further, We are joined by Ravi Srivastav, who's a political analyst and commentator, and Ms. Ruchhita Kazaria, who's a peace activist with Aman Ki Asha, joins me from Kolkata. Let me begin with Ms. Kazaria. Ms. Kazaria, the government's response, and I quote from what they've said, it says, and this is a statement from the Ministry of Home Affairs, India, by settled law, does not allow interference in domestic political debates by entities funded by foreign donations. This law applies equally to all, and it shall apply to Amnesty International as well. Give me your reading of this government response and also what Amnesty said.
My understanding of the current political scenario in India is that, it tries to politicize every affair, especially where the minorities are concerned. Now, all these years, because Amnesty has been operating in the country for quite some time, and, we've never had issues with them. We had a fringe issue with them when the Congress government was here. But lately, on the 10th of September, the attacks which come in is obviously motivated by the Amnesty International taking up the issue of the Jammu and Kashmir and bringing it to the global forum. Because if you realize, it was a gross attack on the social security of the nation. So now when there was no media coverage being belted out for JNK, so an organized outfit, a movement like Amnesty International came to the forefront to bring the news out to the open, to tell people, to educate them that you need to get over the fence sitting and you need to understand what is happening in the country. Now, this entire understanding and appreciation of the subject matter by Amnesty did not go well with the current government, because the current government is somehow very scared whenever somebody tries to open their mouth or express an opinion which will not go down their side, because they feel that the entire ideals on which this government is resting will go down the rabbit hole if people start to understand what is going on in the nation. So having their entire... Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
So what I want to say is that this is not the first time that we are seeing the government get into practices of trying to have the ED interfere or, conducting raids which are untowardly on outfits like Amnesty International. It's happened in the past as well, in a very carefully careless manner. It's happened in the UP also. It happened in the UP government also. I think a year back, if I'm not mistaken, I would not remember the dates, but it definitely happened when the topic was, being escalated. Now, when you talk about Delhi riots or you talk about JNK, now JNK in itself has been a gross issue, because Indians have not come out in large numbers to even say that what happened was not right. The clampdown in communication or the house arrest of senior leaders, these are issues that Indians need to come out and they need to talk about it. Now, because this entire media here in India, unfortunately, is being controlled by the government as of now. So, whatever they want, they, in as many words, they give it out, to the media that you are meant to transliterate it and translate it and read it out in your own lingo, whatever language the TV channel understands, whether it's Urdu or Hindi or English or Marathi for that sake. So what has become is a witch hunt. It's become like a media trial. Now, what do you do in such a situation? So obviously the government will do the chest thumping that whatever has happened has not gone well with the understanding, with the economic understanding of the nation, because we don't accept FDIs, etc., etc. But the narrative here has got nothing to do with the funds, because you see all the papers that have been seized by the ED are already there in the public domain. So it's not that Amnesty needs to hide something under the carpet, it needs to brush something under the carpet. But it's for people to understand that there's an elephant in the room and you need to address it. It's high time that people start thinking rationally. Because until and unless people like us do not come to the forefront, there will be enforced disappearances, there will be murdering and stifling of voices, and there will be raids on human rights organizations, because this government does not understand human rights, is my understanding.
Right. Stay with me, Ms. Kazaria. Let me pull in Mr. Srivastav also. Mr. Srivastav, we've talked about this before also, but it seems that this is getting worse because anyone in India, and I'm talking about, forget Amnesty for a little while, proud Indians who believe in the idea of India, when they criticize the government, the immediate response is to call them anti-national, to call them pro-Pakistan, to call them pro-China in certain cases. This seems to be like going into the direction of authoritarian, regimes, which has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the democratic constitution of India. So give me your reading of what Amnesty has said and the response of the Home Affairs Department.
As the kind of expletives you have used, we hear every day actually. Anybody, since the right-winger supported government from the very beginning, the government has got intolerance towards these agencies who work for the human rights, whether it is Amnesty International, whether it is Transparency International, whether it is a Greenpeace Foundation, all these agencies, the government is very hostile towards them. And in last 5 or 6 years, I can see safely for last 2 years, the government was after Amnesty International. And they have been doing it under the disguise of calling it financial irregularities. They have been citing several reasons for that this funding was improper or this support was improper or something like that. They have been trying to malign the image of Amnesty, and they were indirectly forcing them to close down their entire work in India. And especially, you have seen in last 2 years, several incidents have taken place where the serious human rights violations have taken place. Whether you call it as CAA, NPR, NRC movement, where the government passed the law, and much prior to that, last year, in August of 2019, when the Article 370 was abrogated and there was almost not a lockdown, but a complete curfew and everything in the J&K. And these agencies were reporting these, human rights violations in the foreign media. And as such, the foreign media, the Indian government has got a very serious, intolerance towards the foreign media also, and they outrightly discard any reports published with the Guardian or the Reuters or the Rediff and all that. They are very hostile towards that, and they say that those agencies are actually maligning the image of India. The fact is that there are serious problems, and the government does not want to hear anything against them. Whether there are policies or whether there is a social work or whether there is any kind of work which the government does, they don't want any kind of a criticism to that.
So basically, anyone, whether it's an individual, whether it's a group, whether it's an organization, if they do not toe the line of the BJP government, they will be hounded. Is that sense correct?
Words you have used. Whatever the government says, whatever the government does, if you criticize that, it will be called, the worst part is that they call it sedition. They call it desh se gaddari. That kind of words are used for the people who oppose the government. They do not differentiate between the government and the nation. If you oppose the government, they indirectly thought you are opposing the nation. Those kind of charges are framed against those people who criticize the government. And right thing, whether it is an individual, whether it's an agency, whether it is a social organization, anybody who comes against, in India also there are several outfits which operate for the minority community like SDPI, PFI, AIMIM, all those some political parties also, and the government is very, very hostile towards them.
Right. Final question, Mr. Srivastav. Would you agree with what Ruchhita Kazaria is saying with reference to Amnesty, that what has really given it a fillip was the Amnesty reporting on Kashmir?
Absolutely, I fully agree with Ruchhita Kazaria that the kind of reporting what has been done by Amnesty on the actual position in the J&K, I mean, it's altogether different. The government presents a very rosy picture about the Kashmir, that all is well and everything is going on smoothly over there. And they try to project a different kind of picture altogether than what actually exists over there. So this kind of reporting by Amnesty has not gone down well with the ruling regime. And they have been after them for quite some time. And they took an opportunity to close it. And I think this should be resisted internationally. All nations, because Amnesty operates worldwide, they have got presence in several countries, and it should be strongly resisted with the government of India. Say democracy. In democracy, you have to build up a strong figure. You should be, human right conscious should be at max. Instead, if you are showing this kind of intolerance towards these agencies, I think it will not go down well with the foreign media and other.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was Ravi Srivastav speaking with us. Let me go back to Ruchhita Kazaria here. Ms. Kazaria, it's ironic that the BJP is generally very sensitive to the term fascist. And they do a lot of, defensive mechanism that we are not fascist. But the actions obviously speak louder than words. So, one, I would like to get your take on that. And secondly, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India and also his supporters have been talking about India's great foreign policy achievements under Mr. Modi. But what we have seen is that almost every neighbor in the region, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's Nepal, whether it's China, of course, Pakistan has always been there. No one is happy with him. So do you think that he has achieved something in terms of foreign policy, or the foreign policy has been a total failure? I ask you this because you're also a peace activist.
My understanding of the subject matter on the government's chest thumping about foreign policies is very clear, that we failed. Because if you see, with which country are we actually enjoying good relationships right now? So it's completely backfired, or let me tell you that it was never there, because unfortunately in this country right now, what we see is that the media is being controlled by the government. Now, the minute the media, which is crucial as a stakeholder in any nation, for the progress of any nation, the media is very important, it's crucial. So the minute the media is controlled by any government, they start rattling information. It's not news reporting, it's rattling of information of whatever is fed to them. So today, if I am sitting like a person in my living room, switching on the television, I get to understand what the news anchor is telling me, because the TV is talking to me, right? Because that is my source of information. So most Indians have been deluded. They've been under the delusion that our relationships with the neighboring countries is all great gungo. We are doing well, but the reality is absolutely opposite, and I don't see anything happening like that. So it's become a topic of great mockery worldwide. We are being mocked at. The worst part is that people who have access to parallel news are not wanting to read it, because they are also sold on the nationalism. This Hindutva nara has gone very well with most Indians, which is very, very unfortunate. So as far as your foreign policies go, it's been a complete failure, sir. It's been a complete failure.
What do you think of the Hindutva thing? I mean, India is a country with majority Hindu population. Of course, there are other minorities also. So it's been Hindu. So what's this entire thing about Hindutva? I mean, does the BJP want to, make Hindus more Hindus, or does it want to make Hindus more in terms of its own sort of idea of Hinduism?
It's trying to claim India. That this idea of Hindustan has become Hindi. And by Hindi, you mean Hindus. So what they want to do is that any minority sect, and which has been vocally expressed by BJP post holders even on Twitter, that we have an aversion to every sect apart from Hindus. So it is quite there out in the open domain for people to go and read up those tweets if they have not been deleted, because I'm sure they must have been deleted because there was major public outrage around it. You see the CAA and the CAB, right, which is nothing, which is basically an attack on the social security system of the nation. That is why on any debate, when we are asked to speak about the social security policies of India, it is rather laughable. That where is the social security? And in case you want to understand social security, then you can't be in oblivion about J&K. Because what they have suffered since 5th of August last year is not funny. The
Correct.
problem here is also with people like the majority here. The majority of the Hindus here, you have to understand, are fence-sitters. They are succumbing to passive terrorism. Because when you don't raise your voice against what is incorrect, you're actually on the side of the oppressor. It's a simple mathematics. But people don't get to understand it because they think that we are safe. हम अपने घरों में safe हैं. हमें क्या डरना है? But you don't understand that they will come behind everybody. It's not about you being a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian or a Sikh. It is about anybody who has a voice today is in the minority. And the nation has got nothing to do with people with a voice or with a brain who can think for themselves. They are murdered, like Gauri Lankesh was murdered. Or there are enforced disappearances. People go missing.
Correct. Thank you so much. Thank you also for responding to, actually, you've answered my question about the fascism also. That was Ruchhita Kazaria speaking with us. This is all from In Focus this week. We shall see you next Monday at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.